Hello, I'm Henry Bonsu and this is Doubling Down, where every week we tackle a topic that's got you talking on social media and beyond. Joining me today are Piara Power, Director of the FAIR Network, which uses sport as a tool for social change, the Sports and Inclusion Consultant, Michelle Moore, and the author and blogger, Richard Phillips. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Really pleased to see you all, okay? Now, it's the world's most successful football club, winner of 13 UEFA Champions League trophies and even more domestic titles. But now Real Madrid are making news for another reason. They recently welcomed the Palestinian teenager Ahed Tamimi and her father to watch a match at the Bernabeu Stadium. The 17-year-old, who's just served an 8-month prison sentence for slapping Israeli soldiers, received a number 9 jersey with her name on it. Real already supports 1,000 Palestinian refugee children through their charity arm, but this gesture has outraged the Israeli government, which has denounced it as a disgrace to the sport's values. But the episode has reignited a debate about the role of sport in society that goes back decades, from the boycott of apartheid South Africa to the Black Power salutes of the 1960s, from the Olympic controversies of the 70s and 80s to NFL players taking the knee today. Should famous athletes, their clubs and governing bodies use their platforms for humanitarian causes? All right, panel, we're going to start off. I'm going to start with you, Piara, okay, because you're director of the FAIR Network. What do you think of what Real Madrid did, this gesture?
Well, I think, Henry, they've placed it in the context of a humanitarian gesture. Mm-hmm. They wanted to support someone who's been involved in a struggle, which many people around the world recognise as a legitimate struggle. Mm-hmm. She'd been imprisoned. She was a young woman. This was not something that... she was not somebody who is contested in most of the world in terms of her good work. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to recognise her. They welcomed her to the Bernabeu. And if you look at the way in which it was done, it was all fairly incognito. Yeah. You know, it's not
it wasn't hugely widely reported. It was very well reported in Israel, interestingly.
And I think there we have the crux of the issue. It's the Israelis who don't like this. Most other people wouldn't have noticed or would have no problem with this happening in the quite low-key way in which it happened.
Mm. What do you make of it, Michelle?
I think lots of football clubs want to align themselves with what they would see as good causes and want to be relevant. And sport, we know, has huge cultural presence. And what Ahed did was stand up to oppression. And in doing so, she garnered all of this media attention, which is a positive thing for her. But the club wanted to kind of be connected with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're using that to promote and exemplify some of the work that she's doing. And also, you know, she was using her voice as a political activist.
Okay. And Richard, your thoughts?
I think it's a crude attempt to sell shirts, Henry.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's numbers. Basically, there are, you know, we know that most Muslim countries support, you know, the Palestinians. There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. Yep. There are 15 million Jews. It's a no-brainer. I don't think there's any.
Well, so you think because of that supporters of Real Madrid or people who like Real Madrid and may be aware of the Israeli-Palestinian cause or conflict would be more inclined to buy Real Madrid shirts?
No, I think that there will be supporters of, you know, in Arab countries and Muslim countries who will be more inclined. They'll identify. One of the ironies of this story is that Real Madrid, of course, were associated with fascism. Mm-hmm. They were, they were the royal team. Their Real then title was given them originally, I think, by King Alfonso, taken away when he was deposed, and given back by Franco. Mm-hmm. Franco supported them. Had it been Barcelona or had it been Atletico Madrid, which is traditionally, I think, the club of the sort of workers in Madrid, it might have made a bit more sense. However, I think it was, you know, I think she is an emblem. I mean, she's not quite the innocent that she's painted, or some would say. It depends
on your perspective,
doesn't it? You know, it depends where you come from, but, you know, she's part of a highly political family. Her father was there, and her family have been heavily involved in this. I think from the Palestinian point of view, it was a very good idea. Yeah. I think they get the recognition. I'm going to be interested to see whether they actually start selling her shirts. I actually looked I just looked onto the internet to see if they do. They may. I don't know. But I think I think from Realm's perspective, I think it's about selling shirts.
All right. I can see Piara twitching there.
Well, I just don't see the maths there. I think that this is a sort of gesture that actually would be more recognised and welcomed in the West, more so than Islamic countries.
Well, either way.
The numbers don't really stack up.
But I mean, I think they...
Would you rather, though, that... Do we have to say that you have to be Malala Yousaf to be recognised by a football club and to be a gesture like this?
I don't know. I'm making the point that it's, you know, that it's a highly, you know, that she is a highly political figure, politicised.
Is she? She's an activist, a civil
Well, no,
activist,
she is
a
a
young
political
woman.
figure. She is a political figure. She is you, and I think she's very interesting for a number of reasons. I think one of the reasons that she's become a sort of poster girl for the cause is that she's blonde. Or she's always seen as being blonde.
Isn't it, Michelle, that she's a young female at a time of Me Too, at a time of gender empowerment, at a time when sport is trying to say, look, we include, we don't exclude anymore?
I think when you're a positive female role model and other organisations, big sports collaborations or coalitions want to highlight your causes, then I think that's really positive. Sport has been doing that for centuries. So let's kind of keep it within the context of what we're trying to talk about here, is that sport engages with the mainstream and it uses big figures who have done something really positive for their community and for the world globally. And this is a woman that does that. She uses her voice to do that.
But they wouldn't be doing it if they thought it was going to be negative commercially.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that goes
But I know, but that is the point. That's the calculation they make. Of course they make that calculation. They're a commercial operation.
You see, if we were talking about Colin Kaepernick and the Nike Association,
that's
I could
exactly the same.
I could see that debate taking place. But here, she's a relatively marginal figure globally.
But she's not a marginal figure in that world.
In the Real Madrid world.
No, in the world of
the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
She's not a marginal figure in that world.
But listen, with all due respect, I don't think many Europeans are following that
I
conflict.
don't think it's about European sales. I think they've got all the sales they want. They've never got all the sales they want.
What's interesting is that you can't imagine a British football club doing something like that, do you? I mean, can you imagine?
Well, probably not to her, that's true. But there are many British football clubs who recognise achievement of the kind that Michelle's talked about. Mm-hmm. There are many football clubs who now recognise that they have a role in developing society, in making interventions that empower people, that support causes. Mm-hmm. And you see that throughout the Premier League and even lower down. I mean, I think there are many clubs now who are using some of the leverage that they have in a positive way.
Okay, well, we'll extend this discussion in just a moment or two. But for now, though, let's think about this. Since getting out of prison, Ahed Tamimi has toured several countries, including France, Spain and Tunisia, meeting politicians, activists and journalists. But Real Madrid are the only major sports organisation that has given her such a welcome. Why is this, though? Joining us via Skype on the phone from Chelsea Stamford Bridge Stadium is sports journalist and author Satish Shakar, who's familiar with the Spanish football scene. Satish, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Henry. Glad to be with you.
Excellent. What do you think was the thinking behind it? Because we've knocked this around in the studio, but you spent a lot of time in Spain. You've been down to the Bernabeu quite a number of times. What do you think was going on? What was in their minds?
I think what is in their minds is Real Madrid is now a very, very successful football brand, and they are basically saying, in their own way, to use Barcelona's words, "Més que un club." That is what they are doing, more than a club. Mm-hmm. They're essentially saying, we are a football club, but we have a global presence and we have a duty and responsibility to help socially, and that's what they're doing.
Well, by inviting Ahed Tamimi, it was a particular choice. They're nailing their colours to a particular mast, aren't they? Some clubs would see that as a bit risky.
Yes, and a lot of clubs would see it as risky, but Real Madrid are big enough to be able to say, we are going to do what we believe is right. They believe it is right to associate themselves with Ahed Tamimi and her struggle, and I think they're right to do that too.
And when it comes to the context in which they're doing this, so we're talking about Spain in particular, we heard Richard a moment or two ago talk about Real Madrid having a particular history, being closer to Franco and to the fascists. What context do you think we should see this? Sorry?
There was absolutely no doubt there was a connection between Real Madrid and Franco. Mm-hmm. I mean, the classic example of this is the signing of Alfredo Di Stefano, one of the greatest players in history. He was actually due to go to Barcelona. Mm-hmm. The government interfered and basically suggested that he play for both clubs, when it was absolutely clear that couldn't possibly happen, and effectively facilitated Di Stefano going to Real Madrid. Mm-hmm. So there's no question. I mean, what I do find interesting, and which we're not actually having in this discussion, is the connection between sport and politics. People keep trying to say, keep politics out of sport. It's never been out of sport.
When it comes to Spanish teams, and you compare them to other teams in Europe in particular, but more broadly elsewhere, do you feel that because of their history, Spanish teams are maybe more socially conscious than your average big European club?
I'd say it's not just the Spanish teams. You could say that about the country as well. For example, the first attempt to deal with the dictator Augusto Pinochet was really through Spain. It wasn't through. Even in Chile, they didn't try to do it. Eventually, it happened that they got to him through Chile, and they've basically gone to various other human rights things that they've basically tried to prosecute people over human rights abuses. It's happening in Spain, and it's happened politically in Spain. So I would say that the Spanish people are more in tune, as well as football clubs.
And how far do you think not just football clubs, but big sports organisations or even federations should see themselves as humanitarian or even political actors?
I think they should. I think that they basically do support humanitarian causes. There are some causes which are humanitarian and by definition political too. The plight of the Palestinian people is a human rights issue. It is a humanitarian cause, but you cannot possibly say there aren't political elements to it. There obviously are. And because of that, any football club getting involved or any sporting association getting involved is going to be seen as getting involved in politics. I'll give you another very, very good example, which has been kind of forgotten. A decade ago, you might remember there was a blockade of Gaza.
Remember it well?
Happened during the middle of a prominent football tournament. A footballer used his platform to support the Palestinian people, and he became a hero in Palestine and in the occupied territories and in the Arab world. His name, he is one of the great footballers of modern times, of African times. His name is Mohamed Abu Trika. Why is it that there's no mention of him?
Well, you mentioned him now. Satish Shakar, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, which other football clubs use their influence to push humanitarian and social causes? Well, they include Hamburg St. Pauli, which provides free legal and social services to refugees in Hamburg. During the humanitarian crisis a couple of years ago, the Greek champions Olympiacos launched a food program providing 500,000 meals and 100,000 items of clothing to refugees stuck at the port of Piraeus. And also in 2016, Major League Soccer team Toronto FC welcomed 1,000 Syrian refugees to attend a match against Orlando FC. So it would seem, Richard Phillips, that clubs are really flexing their muscle. This is a trend that is catching on.
I think football clubs are commercial entities. They will do what they regard as being commercially viable. I don't accept the point being made in any way by your guy on the radio.
Yep.
I don't think this is about... I think...
but that means you don't think football clubs, which are essentially groups of people...
I don't think any football club is
going
to fund... First of all,
when they see these humanitarian tragedies or crises, surely they too are moved as people watching at home
If they think it's going to be popular, and it's in their interest, they'll do it. Mm-hmm. If they don't, they won't. I don't see it happening. Real Madrid are a big and powerful, club. They're also short of money. They've just sold Ronaldo, and it's been reported the reason they've got rid of him is because they need the money to get him off the books. And the guy they've signed has got about a fifth of the money, and they would have been at a loss without him. So, I mean, it isn't clear why they've done it at all. Okay. I don't accept that they are doing something because they think it's right. Okay.
Well, football is just one of many global sports. Do you think, Piara, that other sports do as much as they could? Football, of course, is the world's biggest sport, despite what they think in the United States. But think about other big global sports. Do you think that they could do more?
Well, I think that what we have is football responding to issues that are that fall within its realm, if you like.
Yeah.
Football clubs have been under pressure for a long time to do something. Now, most of what you've described that football clubs are doing could be described as charity rather than a humanitarian intervention.
I mean, football teams go out to their African clubs and do a tour and try to, sell their brand, but also show themselves to the people who love them.
Yeah, this is about charity. This is about spreading your wings, meeting your social responsibility. I think one of the most interesting things that we've seen in global sport has been something in the NFL. This is something that I follow quite closely. It's the introduction of what they call the Rooney Rule, which is a mechanism to bring about more black coaches in the coaching system. Now, that has been quite successful in the NFL. There are people who dispute whether it's been successful as they wanted it to be. Now that has been developed and adopted in other sectors. The tech sector in the US, for example, is using the Rooney Rule to get more women involved, to get more ethnic minorities involved. Local authorities in the US are using the same device. Now, that's something that's completely unrelated to the field of play. There is no commercial return, but it's a mechanism that sport has given to the corporate world, and the world is taking it on as a means of bringing about greater inclusivity.
And I suppose when they do this, they're looking back at the history, because these gestures by sporting individuals or organizations haven't always been popular. Let's go back to 1968. Mexico Olympics, Tommy Smith raising one raised their right fist, one raised their left fist, with the so-called Black Power salute. But I understand Tommy Smith, who, Michelle, you know, talks about it being a humanitarian gesture, not a Black Power gesture.
That's right. It was actually a gesture kind of commemorating, well, not commemorating, signifying the Olympic Project for Human Rights. So himself and John Carlos, American sprinters, for the year preceding the Olympics in '68, were going around and trying to campaign and get lots of black athletes to boycott the Games. And it was a failed attempt. And so they decided, how could they make the biggest symbol, how could they create the biggest moment possible? And that was by using their agency as athletes and as activists and standing on the rostrum and raising their fists. And in so doing, creating this massive, massive ripple effect in terms of what they were actually asking for. They were asking for an end, to all sorts of things like slavery, like they were asking for Muhammad Ali's title to be reinstated. They were asking for things that were about humanitarian issues. They were asking for their rights as human beings to be redressed. And they were saying to the world that this isn't good enough, and we will not just run, we will use this opportunity to really kind of shout out and call out.
Richard, hang on a second. You'll be able to come back to that. I can see that something that Michelle said has triggered you, and you'll be able to be triggered all you like in just a moment or two. But meanwhile, it's time for some social media, and here's what you've been saying on Twitter. First of all, Black Gold says politics have been a part of sport since gladiators in Rome. Really can't avoid it. Mike says identity politics is like a plague infecting everything, even our sports. What's next? Determining matches based on diversity and inclusion requirements? And Donna says, sports and politics have always been linked. There's a long history of it providing a platform for marginalised groups. 1968 Olympics, Muhammad Ali, Billie Jean King. But not until Trump stoked his base with his patriotic outrage did this get spun into an act of treason. And here's what you've been saying on Facebook. Eric says, it's encouraging to see two of soccer's biggest stars, Ronaldo and Messi, take a political stance on the plight of the Palestinians. I really wish we could get some political activism out of our American sports stars. Kaepernick is an exception to that rule. We saw what happened to him. But with numbers comes safety and strength. Tony says, I love it when those with access to the mainstream media use it as a platform to speak up on important social and political issues. Thank you, Serena Williams. Jared says, I'm into politics, but politics and sport shouldn't mix. Some people only have sport to enjoy on the weekend and want to get away from it all. It's entertainment. Keep it away from politics. Now remember, you can always get involved in the conversation on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram by using the handle DoublingDownTV. Richard, you want to come back?
Well, I'm not aware of Ronaldo and Messi having got involved in this. Ronaldo, of course, has gone to Juventus, and I don't know what Messi's done.
No, but
they may have done.
Ronaldo has in the past, the Palestinian cause, he has.
I haven't been aware of that. What I would say is I'd be impressed with Real Madrid if they actually got someone from the Uyghur community in China and got them out and gave them a shirt and risked their Chinese sales, shirt sales to do it, which they're not going to do. I mean,
let's wait and see. You never know. Some people are willing to take great risks.
Do you want to I'd take a small wager with you, Henry. I don't think it's going to happen.
All right.
The point about the 1968 protest, they were two individuals. And that's an entirely different thing.
As Michelle gave you the history in some quite a detailed way, it came out of a year of prior campaigning. It wasn't
yes,
just
I may
on
have
the night
done.
saying,
None
we're going to
of
wear
which
black socks.
But it's
and
not
stick up
about
our fists.
corporations. It's about individuals. And we talked about the Kaepernick thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's clever opportunism by Nike. I don't suppose that it's...
But it took a long time for them. How long ago did Kaepernick take the knee first? 2 years ago?
You know, no, I mean, but I mean, you can imagine the amount, the gestation system for any sort of marketing campaign to take place. You know, but I mean, I don't know to what degree it's worked, to what degree it hasn't worked, but clearly it's a commercial decision, and one probably
but it's a commercial decision
counter.
Depending on the zeitgeist. Look at tennis, Michelle. We had somebody praising Serena Williams, saying, thank God for Serena Williams. There aren't many tennis stars who take a risk with their sponsorship, with their profile, their reputation, and say, well, I'm doing this for women or for this cause.
Yes.
Would you like to see more of that in tennis, for example, and other sports?
Definitely. I mean, Serena uses her platform to call out injustice, and we can just see what's happened at the US Open recently, and she was treated appallingly. But she used that position to make the statement that sexism within tennis isn't good enough. And she has received a huge amount of racist abuse, sexist abuse as well. And what we see with Serena is she consistently, unapologetically uses her platform to call out a very, very old establishment that doesn't like her, let's be clear, but she continues to redefine that sport. Her and her sister, Venus Williams, have redefined tennis. And because of their dad as well, because of his massive influence on them, they have created a space where women get paid more money. They have created a space where they are holding up a light to sexism within tennis, and that is something that we need all sportsmen and women to do, to use their position to puncture privilege. They are using their position to say, actually, this is wrong, this is why it's wrong, and the problem with it is how people respond to that, because often, and she does it unapologetically, and that's why I love Serena, she does it and she's angry. And we have a lot to be angry about. When you're oppressed, you have a lot to be angry about. You would know about that.
Well,
Henry.
indeed.
The reality is when you're angry, people don't like it because you're calling out the issue. You become the transgressor, especially in the terms of a gendered way. They really don't like it, and you know, in the case of Ramos, the umpire in the US Open final, he really didn't like being challenged by a woman. He didn't like being challenged by a woman of colour, because she was saying, I know what you're doing is wrong, and I'm calling that out, and I'm holding tennis to account.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's very, very tricky to get it right. I mean, if you look at Formula One, okay, very, very, very hugely global commercial sport, and the biggest star is a black guy, Lewis Hamilton. Every so often he'll refer to race and refer to things that might make him more vulnerable, you know, to stewards' inquiries or whatever. Do you think that he's doing enough, or do you think it's actually unfair of people outside to foist these expectations upon him that Michelle's talking about, that he as an athlete or as a Formula One racing driver should do more?
Well, look, Henry, I think what really makes sport interesting are the human narratives that go with it. If we just run a race and see who wins, that isn't particularly interesting. But it's the backstory of the athlete. It's what they bring to it, where they're coming from, their social situation. That feeds into the narrative of the race, the narrative of the sport, the way we perceive the sport. And so I think to try and separate those two doesn't work for me. You know, you've seen this week Messi pulling apart Tottenham Hotspur. What's interesting for me is, of course, what he does on the pitch, but his background, his social background, the personal challenges he's faced. Now, he wouldn't traditionally be seen as someone who's oppressed, but nevertheless, we're interested in his story. In the same way, Lewis Hamilton, I mean, I miss the references to race that he makes, but nevertheless, he's going to bring something of himself into that sport. To try to think that he's not going to is well, I mean, I think it's wrong. You
it's
know,
one thing for individuals to do it. I mean, more and more individuals are stepping out and taking risks. But governing bodies, are they doing the same? Are they doing enough, governing bodies?
Well, I think governing bodies have to respond. And as Michelle has very articulately said, when someone like Serena Williams lays down the challenge to a very traditional sport like tennis, they have to respond in the right way. They have to say they're listening and respond. And you know, in the end, it's about who plays tennis. That's the question for them. and how are they then treated when they get a racket in their hands? Okay. Those are the questions that exist for governing bodies.
All right, we'll leave the questions hanging there. Sorry, Richard, we've run out of time. And that's it for this week. Thanks very much to my studio guests, Richard Phillips, Michelle Moore and Piara Power. For news of next week's topic and to get your views in early, do check out Doubling Down on Facebook and Twitter. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.